Do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the consent agenda as presented. Approval of the agenda as submitted. Approval of minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting on July 12, 2021. Approval of the proposed accounts for payment. Approval of budgetary receipts and expenditures for July 2021. Approval of minutes of the special hearing on June 12, 2021. Approval of option students, and excuse the absence of John Zimmerman and Lisa Pieper.
Second.
Do you have a treasurer's report?
I do. So, Treasurer's report for the month of July, which represents the 11th month of the budget cycle. Bills this month were fairly low, $280,294. Payroll and benefits, again, because of classified staff not being in the district, were low, $1,591,320, which brings the grand total expenditures for the month to $1,871,614. The good news is the expenditures were relatively low. The bad news is it's also one of the months where our revenue is very low. So revenue was $536,564. Typically, April and July and August can be your two leanest or three leanest months in the revenues in the budget cycle. So always a lean month in July. It's typically the case also in August. At least $1 million in outstanding annual reimbursements is still there. So on the bright side of things, even though our revenue was low, we know we have $1 million of expenditures that we have to be reimbursed for, but that's how the process works. It's expenditures that we have to request reimbursement from the Department of Education, and then once that is all in and it's approved, they send us the reimbursement. So we have about $1 million out there that we are waiting on to be reimbursed by the state. And we still have the ESSERS expenditures from ESSERS 2 that we have started to spend money for, that we'll have to submit reimbursement and get that back to. So that's all part of the equation when it comes to the budget. Overall, budgetarily, we will underspend our budget this year. That number will not be available until obviously August 31st when the budget cycle ends. But we'll also look at a total year-end transfers to reimburse expenses from the depreciation fund and also supplement the upcoming activities fund for the coming year. So as we look at where we are, typically at this time of the year, what I will spend my time doing budgetarily outside of preparing for the next year's budget is trying to finalize where we will finish this year's budget cycle. We're right on track for another year of underspending our budget. The decision will just have to be made as to how much we will transfer to the depreciation fund to cover expenses that we've already made this year and keep that fund up enough to make whatever improvements we want to make from the depreciation fund next year, and then also supplement the activities department and how much we do with that. So it's been a good year. We have basically what's left of the month of August for expenditures, and we'll be ready to start a new budget cycle.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Your votes, please. Passes 5-0. Next up is outstanding recognition, and Mr. Alexander and Dr. Nielsen will be doing that.
So, at this time, if I could have Paul and Tracy come to the front, please. Every month, with the exception of June and July, we have a business friend of the month that we typically recognize for being a partner in what happens with our school district that affects kids. This month, we get started, the school year started back up, but in the month of July, we had a tremendous donation, and we also have lifelong partners from Garnett Investments that I would like to talk to you. So it's with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to award our Business Friend of the Month to Garnett Investments. Paul Garnett and Tracy Garnett Froscheiser have been longtime supporters of our district in everything from helping to sponsor our special Meet Your Cousins PLC professional development event to sponsoring our preschool activities and and special things that happen during the year at preschool, and also being the first business to get behind our Ozone Digital Media Board project at the high school, which we did 3 years ago. They were the very first business when we presented that concept to raise their hand and say, we're all in. That's to the annual tune of $3,000 advertisement donation to pay for the media board. So it's a contribution that helped us get something done that's pretty neat. It's pretty unique for our area, and we were obviously very excited to have their partnership as we embarked on that. But most recently is probably one of the most shocking donations that we've had since I've been here, and quite possibly in a long time in school history. Garnett Investments made a donation of sporting goods equipment that is massively substantial. Paul and Tracy called me back in June, and Paul said he asked if we'd be interested in some sporting goods equipment. And at first glance, I thought, sporting goods equipment? Well, what could this possibly be? But I'm not talking about tennis balls and basketballs or softballs or golf balls or small types of sporting goods equipment. And when he said that it would need a semi-truck to get it here, he wasn't kidding. On July 7th, we had a semi-truck pull in from Utah at our shipping dock down at the maintenance shed that was full of approximately $80,000 worth of sporting goods equipment. And not just little things, but basketball hoops that you see in coliseums that roll out onto the floor and roll back, that will be terrifically handy once we get closer to basketball season and our youth sports start back up. They can be used in our elementary schools, our middle school, or our high school. Volleyball standards and equipment that, quite honestly, folks, is the type of equipment that you see in high-profile college coliseums that, and not just 1 or 2, but 5 sets of volleyball standards with referee stands and everything that's needed to outfit a gymnasium. That is very expensive equipment that comes with carts that you push in and push out because it's also very heavy. So this was not just a small donation to Beatrice Public Schools on their behalf. It was very substantial. And to this moment, we have not had a chance to get all the way through that equipment to see what's all in there. So I apologize we don't have some of it here, but as we get to unpacking it and coaches have a chance to see what's all in there and we get it all dispersed, we'll be taking pictures to really show the community what a dynamic donation this is. So with all that said, thank you very much for being partners in education. There's a plaque. Put up, and then also a certificate of award and appreciation. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for being such good friends of public education. We now move to the information portion of the agenda. First, we'll have a stance report.
Actually, the only thing to report on the stance report is that there's a meeting. We have our first meeting coming up in the 1st of November, and most of that will be preparation for the legislative session. We have 2 lunch and learn meetings with senators scheduled this year, and those senators we're in the process of lining those up. So I'm sure one of them will be Senator Dorn from our district, which we'll be excited to have a chance to meet with them. So right now, stance is just in a transitionary phase from ending the legislative session last June to preparing for the next one upcoming and all things in between.
Thank you. We are now at that portion of our agenda set aside for public comment. We would ask that any person who wishes to come forward to make public comments to the Beatrice Board of Education come forward. I will note that this is a public meeting for the conduct of the business of the Beatrice Public School District. This meeting will operate with civility at all times. Any person wishing to make public comment must abide by and adhere to the following rules and regulations established by the board. Each person shall be allowed to address the board 1 time. The board will not respond to comments or questions. Each person shall limit his or her comments to 3 minutes or less. After 3 minutes has lapsed, the board president will notify the speaker, and the next speaker shall have the opportunity to speak. The board has adopted policies designed to address the chain of command for personnel matters. As such, the board requests that any complaints relating to a particular district employee be addressed to the employee's immediate supervisor or the superintendent prior to the board meeting. Offensive language, vulgar personal attacks, or hostile conduct will not be tolerated. If the board president determines any statement or comment constitutes offensive language, a vulgar personal attack, or hostile conduct, then the board president will rule the person out of order and the person forfeits any remaining time. If the board president rules such person out of order, law enforcement may be asked to remove the person from the meeting. Do we have some people that would like to address the board this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Todd Hido, 900 Oak Street.
Thank you.
This is on the new school, elementary school. I read the last article. I would start off say I'm not anti-school by any means. I agree with everything for schools consolidating. If I had to add something, hopefully we could get the middle school in on that too, because of all the schools. I've been in on top, under, over all those schools for years now. The middle school is probably the worst shape of the bunch. So I want to start saying positive. I'm not anti-school, but this whole idea of doing it without a bond bothers me greatly. It can be done. I agree that there's never a good time to build school. There's always something, but it can be done, and I think it can be done right. Just because you could go around a particular law doesn't mean it's right. For instance, there's a very nice fire station getting built a few blocks down, done with a bond issue, done right. I think if you would approach the public in such a way and market in such a way, I think there's a disconnect between maybe the schools and the public lately with bonds. And I think there may be a little bit of learning how to interact there and do it right. So that's the easy one. I really hope it's a bond and done right with that. The second thing is the timing of it. A few years back, starting in 2005, the elementary schools and middle school went through substantial 25, I think Dr. Cruz at the time was in charge. They put new roofs, boilers, piping, various other upgrades to the schools. Roughly $5-6 million probably at that time, and that was to get the schools at 25 years, the elementaries to get them 25. We're roughly a little over halfway through that cycle. So I think according to my mouth and my head, it was somewhere around 2028 to 2030, something like that, that 25-year span, with all that initial investment to be paid off. When those were now different philosophies have taken place. So anyway, there was a lot of money spent on those schools. I would like to see maybe some of that burned off before. Obviously, those properties aren't worth much in value once you get rid of them, build a new school. So that's the second thing, is just there was a lot of money spent on those schools in that time period. And the third thing is we're a small enough community. It's kind of one person to the well right now. Obviously, it's the fire station. One public works at a time. You have to let one get over with, let the dust settle a little bit, then the next up gets to do their project, whether it's a school project, whether it's a city project, whether it's a county project.
You're at 3 minutes, please.
I'll be finished now. So what I'm saying is it's hard to do two big public projects in Beatrice at one time. And I know, not to get off the tracks too much, I know
But
there's
thank you. I really have to stick to the 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it
Okay,
was 5.
but I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Do we have someone else that would like to speak? We're now moving to the discussion portion of the meeting. Johnson Controls and Mr. Alexander will talk about a facility business plan presentation.
Okay, Todd, thank you. That was a great segue into this portion of the meeting, which I'll just introduce Vince Ardito from Johnson Controls, who's been here before with us. And we did in previous meeting discuss all of the types of issues that we're faced with the 4 elementary schools. That being fire code violations, which we've given that presentation, we'll give it again as need be. Health code violations, most recently from the food inspector. We also have ADA compliance codes issues. We have security and surveillance issues. This summer, we've had multiple issues at one of our elementary schools with everything from dumpster fires to windows being shot out in that particular school, and we have no security cameras there to address that. All the way up to things that we most recently have experienced in our world, which are fresh air ventilation systems that are out of date and quite honestly returning air that comes from the ground for our elementary students. So these are all issues that we did present to the board in a previous meeting and have been exploring different options to address those issues. And I think, Todd, you bring up a great point that a bond issue is one of the options that exists. And so as we continue down this road, understand that we're a long ways from making a whole lot of decisions about anything right now, but it's important for everybody to know the options that are out there. And so that's why Vince is here this evening, is to talk to us about what options are available to us yet, and things that other options outside of a bond issue that we can use to approach and tackle these problems that we have at our elementary schools. So at this point, Vince has a PowerPoint presentation that you can see on the video screens, and he'll be working his way through that and allowing us to talk a little bit about those things. So Vince, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. You know, I was asked when I originally came up here is how can we get the school that we desperately need for the 4 elementary schools. And then the last time I was up here in July, you presented all the violations with standards, the safety, the ADA things that you just mentioned. And when we came back and started looking at this, I mean, this takes a whole different meaning. It's not just about money. It's about how do we keep the kids safe. So, you know, what I'm here today to do, we've done a lot of work preliminarily up front to understand what you're doing. What our ask is today here is we really like to move to the next step of doing a preliminary development agreement. And what that is it digs a little deeper. It gives everybody a little bit better understanding of what the numbers look like on building an elementary school to address the concerns and the safety of the students at the elementary schools. I think I'd move to the next slide. So absolutely, there are several ways to finance this, and the most preferred way to finance it is bond. And as you can see up there, back in September 2015 and November of 2016, those bonds failed miserably. They weren't like close. They failed pretty bad. And so it's been 5 years since the last time. And again, you can go back out to bond, but in the smaller towns in Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, we're seeing this repeated over and over, where they just do not want the tax increase that's out there. And so I believe this is what you guys have faced here. And to talk about a few things, the building had a list of violations, security concerns, inadequate electrical and plumbing, ADA concerns, and inadequate sprinklers. You have the next slide. So just to address some of the concern, the value statement, these are all items identified by the district that I really looked at the presentation and said, you know, what do these things mean? And so some of the compelling reasons are the optimized student learning environment, the safety and accessibility needs, the equitable education needs, aging infrastructures, inefficiencies and high costs, space utilization. Some of the things that Johnson Controls believe our value is in a partnership is an outcome-based solution So what that means is we could bring the student learning environment up to a 2021 standard, meet or exceed all safety, accessibility codes and standards, provide students with the ability for equality of education, improve life cycle costs for energy and operation and maintenance. And really what we want to stress is that piece of it. You don't, if you can improve the life cycle costs, you don't get into the situations you're in today with all the deferred maintenance and all those concerns where you've got ventilation, hung up there with shoestrings and those types of things. So that is a very important part. And eliminate duplicate high-cost space. Next slide.
One of the things before we change that slide, one of the things that I think goes very unnoticed when we start talking about projects like this is, ultimately, we can list all those violations that exist, right? We can talk about fire code violations. We can talk about health code violations. We can talk about lack of fresh air return. But underneath all of that is the equitable educational needs of every student in our district. So whether we're talking about, in this case, we're talking about PK5, whether we're talking about 6-8 or whether we're talking about 9-12, in this case, we're talking about PK5, and we're talking about equitable educational needs and experiences for kids. And basically what that means is that underneath all those violations we talk about, how can we create the most equitable situation so no matter where a student comes from in our community, they experience an equitable educational experience as compared to where any other student comes from. And I just want to highlight that one because I think that's important for us to think about as we continue these discussions down the road.
So an executive summary of our recommendations, we've worked with Jason, we've sat with the facility committee, we've talked about what is it, from a high level that you want in the school district. It's obviously what you want in the school district. And so now how do we bring that down to the PK5 level? So number one, it's the construction of an elementary school, provide a safe and modern learning experience. Those things that we said before, the 2021 learning standard, safety, equality education, improve your O&M costs, eliminate duplicate costs. The second part of this in our recommendation is the risk transfer. So those are on outcome-based solutions, and so that is Johnson Controls giving you a gross maximum price. How many times have we seen, hey, here's your cost, but then there's a 20% contingency, and every bit of that contingency is spent. So this is a gross maximum price up front. That's a fixed cost. We assume the implementation and the savings risk. So not only are we building a building, the bricks and mortar, help you finance it, but we're also assuming the implementation and the savings risk. So if we say this building is going to save $100,000 annually in electrical and water spend, we're wrapping a guarantee around that. So if it doesn't hit that, we pay the delta between there. So once that is written in, that's all that really matters to you guys. After that, it's either us writing you a check or you're assuming the savings. And long-term solution for life cycle equipment and maintenance. Again, the elementary schools from the last architects that were in showed substantial things that need to be improved. And with talking with everybody in the district, those things have not been addressed. And there's about somewhere between $11 and $14 million at those 4 schools that need to be addressed in a life cycle cost program. Those things would all be covered, and that would be off the plate. It would be part of the entire program and building the building. Number 3, the turnkey solution is a single point of accountability, and that's for everything. Like a lot of construction projects, there's some level of accountability with ours. It's everything from development to performance to us going out and getting grants and rebates, doing that work for you guys. The management of the contracts, the financing. The financing is the big part. Is how is it going to be financed? Are we going to look at a bond? Are we going to look at a tax exempt lease? Or are we going to look at an alternative method where We build, own, and operate it, and you guys just pay for it over a period of time. So those are all things in the turnkey solution that we would provide. Complementary funding sources, so that we leveraging the cost savings, reducing capital funding. As I was talking earlier, the energy and operational and maintenance cost savings, those are things that when we identify those as part of the revenue stream that's gonna be paid back, there will be portions of those, depending on what it is and what we come up with, that will be, have a guarantee wrapped around those. Deferred maintenance costs, personnel, cost savings. And then the structured finance piece that we talked about, these are tax exempt leases, public-private partnerships programs, and that part with the public-private partnership program, you can do bonds, you can do lease, you can just do basically money from investors. It just really depends on what makes sense for the district going forward in a 2021 environment. This slide might look a little bit complicated, but if you just go across the top, this is really a timeline of what it looks like to get through the preliminary design, the construction, and then the operate and maintain piece of this. So the first 60 days is really, this is what we're here today to ask for, is the preliminary development agreement, where we can define a scope, the construction, operate, and maintain piece of it. Take a look at that. We'll provide indicative cost estimates. So we'll at the end of this 45 to 60 days, we will know exactly what this will cost you. We just at this point can't give you a guaranteed maximum price yet. And there's a couple reasons why. If we did, every contractor, subcontractor out there would put a cushion on that because they don't know the exact scope right now and what's it going to cost them, you know, with prices fluctuating. The next 6 months will be the actual development, and this is where you get into really the construction piece of it, meaning this is where the design comes in. At the end of that 6 months, you'll actually be able to do construction and get into a construction contract. While we're doing the development, there'll be a 2-month process in there where we're looking at this as what we call building as a service. And what we will do based upon our findings of the old buildings and then what you want in the new buildings is we will take a look at your budgets. What do you guys have budgeted for maintenance right now? What's it actually costing for those 4 buildings? And does it make sense to have all maintenance, all everything included with your building over the term of this contract once you construct the building? Now, in that phase, you may want it all the way to Z, but that may not make sense. It may not be feasible. So you may scale that back to wherever the sweet spot is for the district, to where you guys feel like you still have control, but you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. That'll all be hammered out during the development stage. And then 15 months of the build, and then 28 years when we have the operate and maintain. That's really the piece from Z to wherever we find the sweet spot at on what the operate and maintain contract looks like. It's a part of this. I'm not sure if everybody's bottom box is printed out there on theirs, but it didn't on mine. But really, this is again the steps that we're in. The preliminary development agreement we're looking for. We're asking for an approval tonight, pending legal review by August 16th. We'll deliver those to you by August 18th, and then on execute a construction development contract, which really means the development agreement to develop the design and blueprints, and then we'll complete all that by March 22nd, and then execute a final contract in June. So you can see those move along pretty quick. We'll manage those to a timeline. We think we actually can probably make those go quicker during this process. And then the bottom piece there, that's a kind of a typical timeline, going out and hiring, all the different components separately in the design, build, bid concept. So this slide, everyone's seen this, I think, probably a couple times. But I just wanted to kind of reiterate what it is. So you have your lease purchases under the design build on the left-hand side, the new elementary school. You know, the property tax levy, so this is no new tax money. We're not asking for new tax money. This is money we're gonna find inside the district. So it's really current property tax levy, 10 cents. We yield 1.3 annually for the debt service. And then the savings on the right-hand side, over the 28 years, this is money you're currently spending that you'll be able to pull back on energy savings of over the term of $1 million, operational savings of $11 million, personnel savings of $10 million, and capital cost avoidance, and that's that $14 million we talked about. Those boxes right there are more than enough. Just doing some simple math to finance that $40 million debt.
I think at this slide, I really want to stop for a moment and maybe take a second to absorb that information. Because I think it's, for purposes of clarity and the public forum that was brought tonight, that it's important to explain this. And that is that in this process, essentially, this whole building project comes down to a few cents. And it would no matter what we were doing. If we were passing a bond issue, it would really come down to a few cents of additional tax request, which it still may. But what we're proposing is, and what we've heard in past and before my time here, is that the community really didn't want to see their taxes go up, and I understand that. But what we'd like to see is to find a way, to find an option within our budget to be able to build a school that would offer and solve all the issues that we have with our current buildings without raising taxes. And really that's what this proposal is. It's a proposal of, it comes down to a few cents. And by that I mean, what we do is we look very, very in-depth at our budget, and we say, these are all the places we're spending money currently. In last year's budget, as you recall, we committed 8 cents to the special building fund. And so we operated on this much, and we committed 8 cents to the special building fund to take care of all the building projects that we want to do, and know that if this is one of them, we have to continue to add to that building fund to be able to address needs in the future for the future students of Beatrice Public Schools. So we committed a few more cents from our general fund to our special building fund to be able to start to begin the discussion of this and see if we could realistically do that. And what we found out is that realistically, we can survive 8 cents in our special building fund. We could make that happen. And so now, in the budget preparation for the coming year, the question is, can we do that with 10 cents? And it's, so far, in the budget preparation that's been done thus far, and knowing just a guesstimate of what valuations are predicted to do through help with our local county assessor, we can commit that 10 cents from our general fund and still operate to our special building fund. Now, I explained this to the administrative team, and what it all comes down to is a few cents, literally a few cents out of the general fund to the special building fund, but it's a commitment of 28 years to do that, to be able to pay it off. It's very similar to what, in relationship to everybody sitting in our audience tonight, and you, it's very similar to the same thing we do with vehicles. We, very rarely do we anymore walk in and write a check or pay for cash with a vehicle. I don't do that anyway. I don't know if anybody else does, but I don't. I lease, purchase, or put that vehicle on a payment plan. And I just know out of my monthly budget, I have to account for that. Well, this is an annual budget where we have to annually account for that payment to happen, to be able to complete this project without raising taxes. Now, there's also some question marks that come along with that statement about not raising taxes, and that very specifically is, well, nobody has a crystal ball as to what's gonna happen in the unicameral with taxes in the future. Nobody has a crystal ball as to what's gonna happen with property values and so forth. So I think those are all things that we have to be cognizant of, but we have to ask ourselves, how imperative is it for our students to be in a structure that takes care of all those issues that we've talked about? And ultimately, it comes down to, within our budget, a few cents. But as Todd specifically pointed out, that takes care of the PK5. It does not take care of the 6-8 building. And that's where, as a board, and I think as a community, we have to come together and say, okay, if we can do this within our budget to take care of the PK5, can the community come together and help us out with this very same issues? And Todd, I'm sorry to keep saying your name, but I want to be very specific that you point out the very same issues that exist in our middle school as they do in all of our elementary schools. And so, is there a part to where we come together and say, we're going to take care of this part, the community's going to take care of this part, and really ultimately what it comes down to is a few cents. So I hope that's what this slide really is all about. It comes down to allocating a few cents out of our general fund and committing to operating on that amount of general fund levy and taking that and putting it in our special building fund to be able to do this type of a project.
Thank you, Jason. And I think to add on to the middle school piece, we were just talking earlier about that. There are lots of ways to generate revenue to offset some of those costs. That's not an ugly building that's down there. It's a very nice building for downtown that you could actually turn into something else and generate revenue to offset costs of a new middle school there. And so we do that all over the country, and it's highly successful. I just don't know that with the elementaries, there's a lot you can do with those until we dig into it. But with the middle school, I think there's most definitely probably some way you can find 40% of your costs right there on just repurposing it. Okay, move on to this next one. Now on the next slide, this is the lease back on the construction, and really what that means is we build it and then lease it back to the district over a period of time, and then we hand the keys over after whatever that negotiated time is, and you have 75% life left in the building. So if this is like your house, if you could lease your house for 30 years and when it's finally paid off, they said you have 75% life left in your house, that would be pretty incredible. That's kind of how this is. Now we maintain on here, we do all maintenance, not the janitorial, but everything from HVAC down to anything with water and toilets and sewers and all those types of things. All the grounds, roofs, all those things are maintained and part of this. So why you see over here on the right-hand side, where it has elementary, it says 40 million. You have where it says property tax, the 1.3. Really, I probably should change those colors. The red should probably be green and the green should probably be red, but for sake of, just going forward, what the red is, this is money that you will have to spend, and then the green is where you'll need to spend it. So the 40 million is paying the debt service on the financing of the building, and then the box at the bottom has operate, maintenance, and all capital costs, upgrades and replacements. That's the 1.2 million. So what that means, literally, HVAC goes out, it's replaced, or it's at end of life. I know they were talking earlier about the elementary schools had some stuff replaced in early 2000s, 2005. Most equipment has a 20-year life. If you get into the chillers, they'll have 25 to 28. Although they have a life of 20 years, they're using efficiency from 20 years ago. And so they're just, that offsets really quick when you're spending more electricity than you need to be doing. So one of the things when you build this approach, it's a life cycle approach, and you build these to last, like Armored armored tanks, and so you know you're gonna get the best of the costs coming in are gonna be higher, but the cost over time is gonna be less, going forward. So, that's that approach there. I think the last page is Widener School, and I think we've summed that up today. You know, modern learning environment, the current schools are, unsafe, inefficient, and have high cost to operate. And the cost to build a new school under a lease purchase or lease buyback has revenue streams to offset the debt service. And that's really, if you can build a school with old money and not ask for new money, that's a win-win for everybody. And then I just put some bullets down here. You know, approximately, when we've looked at the market, what's going on, you're gonna be probably around that 40 million mark. That's gonna be financed, and then, you know, the building fund of the 1.3, and then, the energy, O&M personnel, cost avoidance savings annually of around $1.9 million. And so that $1.9 million is probably pretty close to everything you guys spend right now in maintenance and operations and capital costs that you have. So that's the end of the presentation.
Good time to, whatever's going through your mind, this is a good time to ask those questions. I know that's a lot to absorb, but
Well, my first question would just be this, this slide here with the blue and gray boxes. You would need this to be executed by August 16th. What if we decide not to vote in favor of this tonight? Is September sufficient, or
Everything
why
just
is
moves
that
back.
August? Okay.
Oh, yeah, everything just moves back.
This is
I mean,
just-
yeah, so really we're looking at kind of that end date of when construction would start, and then when you go 15 months, where does that put you? Right at the beginning of the school year. And so that's the reason why it's there.
Gotcha.
And actually, I probably should have been a little better when I talked about this. What we're asking for is really the ability to have this agreement signed pending legal review. And so we'd want, you know, legal to look at it, you guys to review it, and those types of things. Typically, I mean, I think within a week, this is not really a big investment. At the end of the day, if we go forward, there's not even any costs involved in it, out-of-pocket costs. But if we decide, hey, this is an off-ramp, we don't like where we're going, thanks for all the information you gave me, then it's just the engineering and architectural costs that will need to be paid, and that's all in the agreement.
so just for clarification purposes, phase one of the agreement just basically is agreement between Beatrice Public Schools and Johnson Controls to do all the engineering, architectural, cost analysis, all those things up front before we get to the go-to-bid construction phase. So there's a cost to doing all that work, obviously. I mean, that's gonna take somebody a lot of time to get all that done. And so that's what phase one is all about. Then if we get to phase two and come back with all those numbers, then you have the second vote to decide, yep, we're moving ahead, or no, we're not. And that's what Vince refers to as the off-ramp for you as a Board of Education. So it just gives you that opportunity to, at that point, say, no, we're gonna pump the brakes, man. So
It's another level of really coming up with those indicative costs. We want to have those cost estimates right on the money at the end of this phase, and that's what we're going to bring back to you. Then the next step, as Alexander said, is the development phase, where all the drawings get done, everything gets done. It's where we RFP it out to all the subcontractors. Now, you know, typically in these situations, we like to use as many locals as we can, because number one, they know the areas, their costs are gonna be better than anybody else's bringing somebody from the outside in. And typically they have some type of relationship with the district. And so we always get better response from those guys. And so we do all that during the development stage, which is the next one.
What is the square footage that you were projecting to come up with 40 million?
Well, right now we have that as a max of 120,000 square feet.
Thank you.
And again, during the development phase, if costs go up, you guys are really still pushing to go forward, we may have to scale that back. And So you have to scale a couple things back to try to make numbers work and get you where you want to be.
Are you determining that 120,000 square feet is enough for PK 5?
Yeah, that's a number we came up with, architects came up with, and we felt was pretty comfortable number. If we, now again, when we sit down and you guys say, hey, I want 4 gyms in here, then no, that's not a better number. That's not a good number. And that's what we have to sit down and do in this next phase. You know, does this school get a kitchen in it? And if so, you know, kitchens aren't cheap in schools. And so, you know, all those things, which we're looking at it as having a kitchen, but if you decided not to do that, then you make something else out of it.
And you probably haven't gotten to the number of classrooms or stuff, you haven't looked at any of that. at
No,
this
that would all be done during this phase.
Okay.
Mhm. There'd be a lot of interaction with the district, ourselves, the architect, our mechanical engineering partners would sit down and we would be wanting to figure out what is the best solution. There's a lot of things we know, and a lot of things we don't know, and we need to figure out things we don't know.
Thank you.
Has there been any discussion about 2 buildings so this one isn't so ginormous?
And I have never been portrayed that.
I think that would come in the next phase as an option if we wanted to look at that.
We could look at the difference in cost. So.
I mean, they'd be located close to one another, but there would be, I don't know.
If we do approve of this tonight, what is the time frame on deciding whether, if we're gonna need to go with a bond or a lease agreement?
So we would go through the first phase of it, really wanting to get costs, and then when we get into the development phase, there will be a specific part of that where we're gonna go through financial structure of what makes the most sense, what we're gonna do. Doesn't mean we kind of don't know that maybe ahead of time, but we could see, you know, the lease prices skyrocket, but bond prices stay low. Say, hey, that may be the route you want to go, or vice versa. You know, you can see right now, lease prices are almost identical to bond prices. And so that would be all hammered out in not this phase. This right now, we're gonna be getting numbers that were really good, and then we'll be able to say, what's the best way to model this? And we'll give you some real in-depth modeling of what that looks like. If we pull stuff out, if we add stuff in, if we look back at history, what's got the district in the most trouble on deferred maintenance? Maybe those are all items we want to have someone else maintain and on their books and take care of instead of us. And so, and then when we do that, we'll start looking at the structures of what we want to do. Because some of those are a little different. I mean, some of those we may not be able to put under a bond if we go that route. Some of them we may. Just really depends what kind of bond we do as well.
I think it's important that we focus on getting the information out to the people at this point, because whether through polls or I had some ideas of possibly sending polls through the mail or online to see what the people, what they're feeling, and also maybe send out flyers or have information events where we can show those pictures that Jason had at that committee of the whole meeting, where, you know, because the biggest thing I'm getting out of the public is I mention it and they just roll their eyes and they don't want it and they don't know the information. I think that's what hurt us the last time around, last 2 times around, where not enough information was out there for the public. And I think that's important to know that time frame so we can begin this public campaign to get that information out there so we can be successful this time around. Because with the whole lease thing, my worry is that it would be decided on the votes of the school board and not the votes of the people. And I mean, I agree with Jason. I 100% agree that I have no doubt that we can survive the lease agreement. It's a strong plan, but I think it's important for the people to hang their hat on something rather than the school board to move forward. So I think it's important that we get that information out there so people can make that decision and help us make our decision.
I share some of the same concerns. I think just having lived here during both of the previous bond issues, I was new to town both times. I lived here a couple times, and the perception was just so poor of the district from the community's eyes, and I hated that because I was excited to send my kids to school, and I just want the community to feel comfortable with our decision and have them be a part of it. I guess my question, and going back to this phase one, would you say that this is more like an exploration period, like to see exactly what we would be building, what the costs are, and then we could decide between bond or lease purchase, or just not at all, or?
Absolutely, it's, so, a lot of times this isn't separated out, we felt it needed to be here. Because there's a lot of unknowns, and so the pre-development agreement is specifically going to go out, and we're gonna take schematic drawings to a certain level. We're going to go out and you know, talk with the architects, and the engineers are gonna work back on all the numbers that they've been using lately, and model what all the different, you know, size buildings, classrooms, materials, and all those things are gonna be put in there, and come up with a pricing. That pricing should be pretty spot on. We just at this point can't put a guaranteed maximum on it, because we don't have contracts with subs that say, this is my price and I'm gonna guarantee that price. So yeah, it is an exploration. We'll have lots of meetings with the district, which may be a good time to have meetings with the public as well, and say, what is it that you want in a new school? Because we may think we know what you want, but we may not be close. And so we'll sit down and really find out what it is that you want in the school. Or there may be some things that are being put in the school that aren't necessary, that you don't want. I mean, we know probably one thing everybody can agree with is that you want some secured entrances. You want to make sure people that are coming and going have the right to come in that building. I mean, I was at a school not that long ago, and you could have walked out with any kid in there. Their bathrooms by the front door and their lunchroom, and it was in a separate building, and nobody was guarding the door. The doors were propped open, so it was like anybody could come in. So, yeah, it would be really pre-development, and then we're gonna come back and say, this is what we see, this is what you helped us paint a vision of, and these are the costs that we're looking at. The next step from here is you guys agree and vote on moving into the development stage, where we're actually going to do all the drawings, and we really get into the meat and potatoes of it. And then there'll be a third step. Once those are all done, everybody signs off on it, and you sign off and get into a construction piece of it.
Thank you.
And in that development part, as Eric said, we will define the financing of what all that's gonna look like, and where you're gonna go.
For the record, I'm 100% in favor of a new school, but like we need it desperately. And if there's anyone in the community who thinks that we don't, I would encourage them to reach out to us, because we've all seen what our buildings look like, and it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, this is going on all over. I mean, we have some universities where they're using alternative funding mechanisms nowadays. It's just the way it is. The states have cut all their money. They have to find a way to build these new residence halls. So it's happening in different ways, but it's happening in all education. And we actually have an entire team that's dedicated to finding grants and rebates in the procurement process when we go through that. And so like every light bulb we put in there, we'll be able to get rebates on it. You know, every certain type of water fixture, we'll get rebates on it. And so air conditioners, if we meet a certain thing, when we do the geothermal, we'll be able to get rebates, even tax credits on it. If we do it all correctly, we can funnel that back to lowering the gross maximum price.
I just have one more question.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
The legislation where they're trying to eliminate this lease purchase option, do you anticipate that that would be something that will come up again this next year and be passed through?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I sat down with Senator Dorn and explained to him why it's important for schools to have this type of tool. I mean, the analogy would be that as a person on a farm, if I have a tractor that breaks down and I need a specific tool to fix that tractor, I want to be able to access it and use it to fix my tractor, to be able to keep going. Well, very similar situation here is that, you know, we have the bond, as a tool to address the issues that we have in our buildings, but that's at the vote of the decision of a lot of other people that actually control that tool. And so if that tool can't be accessed, then as it would be with the tractor in the field, then the tractor doesn't go anywhere. And without the bond, if the bond isn't successful, then these are the only options that communities and schools and towns are left with to address the issues like we're talking about addressing in this situation. So I think, you know, to Eric's point about getting community input, and I wasn't here, and Janet and Doris could speak more to the point. I'm not opposed to doing those things, but the people have to come and the people have to listen. And my understanding is the last time that happened, there wasn't a lot of that took place. Those options were available, but people didn't come and ask those questions. They didn't come to the buildings and walk through them like you did. And there were open houses held, there were all kinds of things held. So I think it's not worth not trying. But I think at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, if this is the tool that we have, what do we do? And that's the explanation that I gave Senator Dorn, is that, you know, in some districts across the state, it's the only tool that's available for schools to address those things. So I do think, last year was LB 523, I believe, I do think that it will be proposed again. In terms of what the outcome is of course, we won't know that until it happens, but it's definitely something that you have to take into consideration in the timing of doing all this.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Vince, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I know it's a long drive back to Kansas City. So.
I'm not going back to Kansas City.
Okay. Thank you.
We now move into the action portion of the agenda. First up is action on policy 1240, parental involvement. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 reaffirm policy 1240, parental involvement.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? This is about what Mrs. Reppel will talk to us about at the special board meeting. If not, your votes, please. Thank you. Next is policy 1250, Title I, parental and family member engagement. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 reaffirm policy 1250, Title I, parental and family member engagement.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Your votes, please. The vote carries 5-0. Next is the approval of the Johnson Control Facility Business Plan. Do I have a motion?
I move to authorize the superintendent to enter into negotiations with Johnson Controls on a contract to develop strategies and designs for a new PK-5 elementary school building and possibly other new buildings in the district pending review by district legal counsel.
Second.
Second.
Comments, please. My only concern would be that we only have 5 members here tonight. I would be more comfortable if all 7 of us were here, but that would be my comment. Otherwise, your votes, please. Passes 5-0. Next is a special education contract with ESU 5 for the 2021-22 school year. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the special education contract with ESU 5 for the 2021-22 school year.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are you going to speak to this?
Sure.
Okay.
And then I'll just stand here because I'm like the next.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one is our contract we do with ESU 5. We've done this for as long as I can remember. We contract vision, physical therapy, mental health, and then this year we're adding deaf and hard of hearing services. We had been doing that teleservice the last 2 years because we didn't have anyone that was available to do it in person. So we're excited this year that we're actually gonna be able to contract a real live person to come into our buildings and provide those services instead of utilizing a para to set those up and do them via Zoom. Any questions on the issue? Okay.
Your votes, please. Motion passes 5-0. Next, the contract with Nebraska Mental Health. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the contract with Nebraska Mental Health for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
Thank you.
So this is, I think the 5th year that we've used Nebraska Mental Health. They provide a 0.5 FTE school psychologist to provide evaluations and MDT meetings for our special ed students, and then 0.5 FTE for mental health services. So that's been the same, we're just continuing exactly as is.
I would just add as a point of clarification, this is one of the things that Beatrice Public Schools has offered for many years, is this 0.5, which is equivalent to a half-time person to address mental health needs in the district. But through our ESSERS funds, we're working on a contract with Beatrice Community Hospital to provide additional support for that, utilizing our federal ESSERS funds as well. So,
Your votes, please. Motion passes 5-0. Next, contract with a speech-language pathologist. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the contract with Rhiannon Svitek, speech language pathologist for the 2021-22 school year. I think I probably massacred her name.
Talk.
speed talk.
Sweet talk.
Second.
You notice I
We're close.
skipped it. Do I have a second?
Second.
So Rhiannon has been with us for, I think, 3 years, and she had been providing services at the high school. And this last school year, we had an SLP resign at Paddock Lane because she is moving out of state. So Rhiannon has agreed to pick up a few more days on her contract to fill in the needs at Paddock Lane.
Your votes, please. Motion passes 5-0. Next, approval of a contract with an occupational therapist. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the contract with Emily Zarbaneski, occupational therapist for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
Second.
So this is new for this year. In the past, we've had 1 occupational therapist and 2 occupational therapist paraeducators, which meant that our OT worked on her own. She had to plan, do all the meetings, do all the testing. It was quite a bit. So this year we've moved to having an OT part-time, so 0.5, 20 hours a week. And then we no longer have the OT paras, so they've been put into other positions within our district. It would be nice for Corey Noak, so she doesn't have to do all the testing, all the planning, driving between homes and the 6 buildings, so.
I don't get where's the half, the 0.5 then?
So we don't have OT paras, and now we have,
But this is just for one person.
yeah, so she's part-time.
Oh, I see, okay. But then we have a full-time person also?
Yes, so instead of a full-time OT and 2 paras, we will have 1.5 FTE OTs.
But we're approving tonight a 0.5?
Yes.
Okay,
The other OT is on a Beatrice teacher contract.
all right. Any other questions? Your votes, please.
Questions?
Motion passes 5-0. Next is an agreement for special education services with Nebraska Center for the Education of Children. who are blind or visually impaired. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the agreement for special education services with the Nebraska Center for the Education of Children who are blind or visually impaired, ESU 4, for the 2021-22 school year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So this is our orientation mobility services for our visually handicapped students. They work with cane training, walking in the community, things like that. It's a pretty small amount of time. We don't have a large population with.
They come here in person.
And just for a point of reference there, I don't, just for audiences, educational purposes more than anything, typically, this is an example of us going outside of an educational service unit area because we're educational service unit number 5, but we weren't able to contract that with number 5, so we have to reach out to another educational service unit. So therein lies the importance of educational service units in our state.
Your votes, please. Motion passes 5-0. Now, approval of the interlocal contract for enrichment activities. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the interlocal contract for enrichment activities with ESU 18 for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
Thank you.
So this is with SNRP, and they're housed out of Lincoln, but they provide supports for our students with hearing impairments. So they come down and help with hearing aids, make sure FM systems are working in the classroom, things like that. And it's no cost to the district.
Votes, please. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Got the right price on that one.
That's right.
Next, we have the administrator's report. Is that just going to be you?
That's just gonna be me. Principals start back next month with their
Okay.
reports.
All right.
And the part of the meeting you can't wait to hear, Doris, that's how that works, right?
Yes, brief. Briefly.
It's an exciting time. I'll be brief, bold, and then be seated. It's an exciting time. We welcome back 23 new teachers this past week. The entire staff reported today. So as we approach the start of the school year, the energy is amping up, and it's a good feeling, especially this year, coming back under the conditions that we are as compared to last year. So that's where we're at. Tomorrow we have school improvement process planning. We have multiple meetings in the buildings that are taking place. And then Wednesday, we have the entire staff together for a nice energetic welcome. We're excited, and you are also all invited to that on Wednesday, starting at noon, I think, or 12:30 with service awards. So in the commons at the high school, and then we transition into the Hevelone. You heard me talk a little bit tonight about budget preparation. That is in full swing. Had an opportunity to work with the Nebraska Department of Education finance staff at Administrator Days and really dive into it from the standpoint of everything that we're talking about tonight and how that impacts this budget in the coming cycle. So that's coming along nicely. I'll probably have some sort of update for you after August 15th when valuations are certified. Right now, that's kind of the magic number that I'm waiting on before being able to have a more fine-tuned budget report for you. So that will happen shortly, and then I'll be able to get that information out to you. Just a short note about the Trailblazer Fall Kickoff that took place last week. We were fortunate to have 6 schools attend that, representatives from 6 schools, so about 150 coaches, athletic directors, superintendents, and principals attend that, and it was a terrific kickoff event for the start of the school year. We had a meal, we got a chance to talk about the bylaws and so forth, and it was just awesome. And a special shout out and thanks to Missy Timmerman for helping put together the video that we were able to show at that event that represented all of those districts and the success we had as a conference at the conference level and state level. Much appreciated by Ralston for hosting that and Beatrice for organizing a lot of it as well. Just a reminder, strategic planning information has gone out. Please have that on your calendar. We'll send reminders of that in the coming week, because I think then it's the week after that we have our first strategic planning session. Very excited about that opportunity to get that going. We did receive note today from the Department of Education that our early childhood program was approved by the State Board of Education, so that's always good to get at this point. And with that, that's all I have, unless there's questions.
Thank you. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be September 13th, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the Administration Building. The Committee of the Whole meeting will be August 26, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the Administration Building. An agenda for the meeting, which shall be kept continually current, is readily available for public inspection at the Superintendent's office during normal business hours. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 adjourn.
Second.
Your votes, please. Passes 5-0. This meeting is adjourned.